Welcome to the Safe Business Agility Podcast. This is the place to get advice, stories, perspectives, and updates about safe and related topics to help you work differently and build the future. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, fans of the Business Agility Podcast, we have a fun one for you today. I'm actually going to hang out and talk to three of my colleagues, and that might not sound like a big deal, but in our world, it's hard to find time to spend time together. So we're going to be talking to three framework team members, two methodologists, and an amazing artist. They're all the same. They're from the same team. You might figure that out. We're going to be talking to Rebecca Davis, Andy Sales, and Dean Leffingwell about the path to Safe 6.0. Now, this might not go the path that you would expect. We're just having a conversation. I think you're going to get a feel for exactly who these amazing people are. They're super intelligent. They're some of the teammates building the things that are changing how we all live and work. But really, they're amazing people. So I really hope you enjoy this one. This was a lot of fun. It was a great conversation. Enjoy this one with Dean, Andy, and Rebecca. What a day, y'all. So we're sitting here in Boulder, Colorado for the first time in 3 years doing an SPCT immersion week. And it's really cool because that means Andy and Dean and Rebecca are all here and we get to spend time together face to face, which isn't something that we usually do. But it also means it's a really tiring week because we're not often all in the office together. So everyone wants a little bit of time, including me for this podcast. So thank you all for making the time to hang out. We're a week out from the launch of Safe 6.0. We're here doing immersion week, next week's PI planning. How's everybody feeling?
You.
I'm excited, Adam. This is also, looking at Dean and Rebecca here, the first time we're getting to teach Safe 6.0 live to our Immersion Week students, but also all of those attending the class remotely this week, Adam. So we're super excited about trying the new content and getting the feedback immediately from those who are learning it.
Yeah, it's been great seeing some people in person again this week. You get to get more insights from each other. This class is going to be pretty exciting. I think we've put in a lot of fun, a lot of flow.
And releases in Agile are designed to be no big deal. It's still a pretty big deal. But when I go home at night, I think about, am I proud of that release? Is that like the best thing we've ever put out? Is there anything in the market that competes on any dimension with the content in Safe 6.0? And I go to bed knowing that's a really great release. And I think we've done a lot for the market. I think we've done a lot for the people that are building these big systems and a lot for their users. So I'm never satisfied, but I'm content that at this point in time, we have a really, really great release. Leapfrogs 5.0 and 5.1 puts us in a new place, a place where long-term we're going to see things differently through a flow lens. We're going to be able to measure better, measure the intangible without interfering and slowing down the people that are being measured. So I think it's a baseline for the future, and it's just a more comforting spot than I've been at for a couple of releases now, just knowing that I think we got a lot of the stuff in our backlog in that release. We focused down, again, on high-performing teams. It's all about Agile teams that work great. We're providing different additional guidance for them. We're talking about flow. We're providing different ways to debug flow, different responsibilities for implementing flow, and really start to reflect, I think, better guidance to build really high-performing teams. Because when all this is said and done, if those teams aren't great, the art isn't great, the solution tree isn't great, and the portfolio isn't great. So it comes back to the team, kind of Agile 101, and I'm glad that we put so much attention on the team. Over the years, we've had to scale, and now we're kind of back to basics. It's like, okay, after 15 years of Agile, what does a really high-performing Agile team look like? Did they run pure Scrum or pure Kanban or pure Safe or anything for safer teams? Probably not. They probably run something that works for them, and we try to help them discover new and different things that can work for them even better than the classical tools they've been given.
Well, I think that's a good point. The foundation is happy people build cool stuff. If you can have happy, content people on high-performing teams with some focus, they do really cool stuff. And I think it's important to also point out that this was a big release, but it wasn't necessarily a big batch, right? You know, Andy, you mentioned that, you know, this is the first Safe 6.0 implementing Safe formally that we're teaching. But we've actually been testing this material for, it's been over a year, hasn't it? We've delivered these classes, specifically the ones that we do here in Boulder with you and Dean and Rebecca. We've been testing this stuff and we've been releasing articles, it seems like, since Q2 2020.
Yeah, I mean, both with the articles and the courseware, we have a pretty well-proven approach to validating, as you mentioned, Adam, along the way. In terms of the articles, we'll often release some new guidance as an extended topic article before it finds its way into the framework. That's a great way for us to understand how enterprises are going to use it, get feedback, and then obviously iterate before it becomes a prime article. And similarly with the courseware, we've been teaching kind of secretly, I would say, Dean and Rebecca, without calling it Safe 6.0, some of the new concepts in the new implementing course. Things like bringing value stream thinking in to the beginning of day one. Things like setting all the principles in their particular context. Things like bringing in the new concepts around flow and built-in quality. What happens, though, over time is these extensions of the framework in terms of the extended guidance topics or incremental improvements to courses eventually become such that it demands a major new release of the framework. And that's what we saw, just over a week ago. As Dean mentioned, there's so much in Safe 6.0. It's really going to get organizations to think very differently about the way they approach their work, how they accelerate the flow of value, how they build in quality, how they adopt new technologies, things like AI, and also how they start to extend SAFE across the business. So after a while, the iterative approach then becomes so significant that we need to encapsulate it in a big release like we did last week.
Well, sure. And it was really about the story, right? So we've had the pieces in place and we've been talking about the pieces, but what we didn't have was the wrapper that says, well, here's the reason why all of this guidance is coming out, and this is what it means, right? So that's really when you look at, we've done a lot of release on demand. The articles have been coming out. They have been peer reviewed. They've been tested. But what was missing, to your point, was that story, right? So what does all of this mean? What does this change mean? What have we learned? And why is it important that we bring this conversation to light now? So, Rebecca, I know that we all know you so well, and I feel like a lot of people should know you, but I think your addition to this team was really important because I think the three of us, we all have backgrounds in consulting. Dean's been working at this stuff, across many enterprises for a lot of years, and Andy has, and I have as well, and I know that you had as well. But what's different about your experience is you had a pretty cool role before you came here, right? You were working for a company that did something that had never been done before in the face of a global pandemic, and you tested and validated a lot of the guidance that was given, but then you also had an amazing feedback loop to us that said, hey, these things are working, these things aren't. These are the ways that we're starting to think about the world differently, given all that we've learned through this fire hose that was the pandemic. And I think just the value that you've added in the perspective has been really, really cool, because you have been doing this stuff as a native citizen of a large enterprise instead of just being an outsider. So I think your perspective has been amazing. I
appreciate that. I think working inside of, one of the global 20, I think, is a rare opportunity. It was really nice being able to have supportive leadership across that organization, and really being a leader of transformation in partnership with the executive team at CVS Health. And we were able to organize around value as needed in order to meet the pandemic, in order to meet other needs. That wasn't the only healthcare company I've ever been at to do that. And what I've learned over my career and what I'm so excited about with 6.0 is when you're solving really complex human issues, whether it's human experiences or whether it's the fact that within one family, you could have critically ill children in addition to adults that need care, in addition to all these things. And software does support all of that these days, as does hardware and medical devices. But how do you take hundreds of thousands of people sometimes and have them work together to build what really is a very human experience? You need everybody for that. It's not just a technology story. It's 100% a business story. It's bringing in product management. And how do you flow across that many people? I think 6.0 gives us the ability to think about flow, connecting strategy to execution, having that not be like a buzzword thing to say, but actually doing it, and organizing these massively complex situations so that we can really make the world a better place to be in, no matter what your role is.
So I feel like you've probably had more experience, more direct experience with what that feels like than most. Do you feel like you're really able to articulate what that looks like and what that feels like? Because I think for a lot of people, they hear flow and they think, okay, that's cool. And I can visualize it, right? So like when I think of flow, the examples I always gave were like FedEx, for example, when you sit in the distribution center and you can watch the truck come in that unloads and goes into a pallet that goes onto a plane, and the plane's full just enough time to close the door and make its takeoff window, and you watch that motion. That's flow. when I think of an e-commerce distribution center and you can watch an order come in, a hook deploy, that hook runs around the warehouse, picks up whatever's in that order and meets a box at the precise point on a conveyor belt and drops the products in enough time to be sealed, labeled, and on a truck, I can visualize that and conceptualize that as flow. But in a business context, how would you describe that to somebody? How would you give some real meat to that to say, this is what it means and what it looks like in a more IP style environment, right? Where we're communicating ideas, where we're building things that are based on code and business solutions and how we interact with people.
Yeah. I think flow is very personal. And when I say like personal, I don't mean like necessarily as an individual, but depending on context. So a lot of the executives that I've coached before, I think the way that we would discuss flow is how can I have enough visibility and transparency across what all of the human beings in my organization are doing to be able to ensure that the next strategy, the next thing, we're able to organize them for flow, and therefore my organization has flow, and therefore so does my profit and my shareholders. If you're an individual, and especially on this team, that it was a realization inside of the framework team as I joined it more so than any other team, flow inside of, to me, the framework team is when we are together. Some people might call that a meeting. But to me, when our framework team is together, we are in flow. Everything else a little bit feels like homework. Another team might say, like, when we're together, it feels like homework and we're just setting up so that I can have time to be in flow. And I think that's why it's so critical to understand your context. After being on the framework team, I'd love to see more teams see flow as when you are together as a team. That's how I truly feel it is for us.
It's kind of a funny inside joke. Due to the stresses that we put on people that work hard, and knowledge workers in general always take on too much, the organization adopted a model that said on occasional Fridays, we're going to have no meeting Fridays. We said, that's really cool. That's our meeting Friday. So on no meeting Friday, we meet all day. We're there, distributed, of course, but we know we're there. So if whatever conversations we have a very natural case, because I might work a little bit for an hour and ping Rebecca or Andy or Harry or Rick and get immediate feedback. And I get it immediately. So it doesn't have the cost of delay built into saying, well, I know on Monday we're going to have a meeting, Tuesday we're going to have a meeting. I know that Andy is there right now. So in those core hours is probably our most productive time. So we've used no meeting Fridays. It doesn't feel like a meeting. It feels like working together the way we like to work. It is a meeting. We block it out in our calendars, say, don't overwrite this because there's no meeting Friday and we're meeting all day.
I call them Flow Fridays now.
I think you could brand that, Rebecca.
Yeah.
It could be a thing.
And just to bring those ideas kind of back to the Safe 6.0 and the framework and the new release, one of the challenges that organizations had really was they didn't have a way of talking about flow or measuring flow. So one of the things we did over the last year is really go back and ask ourselves in the same way that Dean and Rebecca were giving examples here, what are the properties of a flow-based system? Whether it's teams delivering stories, whether you're moving big epics through the portfolio, whether you're delivering value directly to the customer. And we discovered 8 things that all flow-based systems have, things like batches, things like queues, things like bottlenecks.
Things like policies.
The people doing the work. So suddenly then you had the ability to look at a level of the framework, be it a team, an art, or a portfolio, and ask yourself, how are we performing across those 8 properties? How good are we at flow? Coupled with that, in Safe 6.0, was the ability to measure through the flow metrics, and then critically, the ability to take the remediating actions to improve flow through what we call the flow accelerators. And what's kind of interesting about those is we didn't look to generalize them at each level. There are 8 general remediating actions, but they look different if you apply them at a team, an art, at a portfolio level. So in Safe 6.0 is the work to think about what does it mean to affect flow at different levels of the framework. And that was a really interesting exercise we had to go through.
I think that was the heart of 6.0, and the heart of our research really was oriented around flow. Yeah. And when we looked at team-based systems like Kanban and Scrum, they flow differently. Scrum is very time box-based, and there's nothing like a time box to focus your mind. But there's no need really to say, okay, I want to burn down these stories during this period. I can focus with goals, et cetera. You look at Kanban, those systems are they're very flow-driven, but it's really hard to figure out how you manage dependencies, how you integrate with others. And by the way, without that deadline, people don't seem to take work quite as seriously. I think the big picture here has to do with value stream management. We've done value streams in SAFE since about version 3. I don't remember. We looked
2.5, I think. Yep.
Crawled in a corner to version. It's always been there. It got a promotion this time. It's what we do for our value stream management. And when we looked at the old but profound principles of value stream management. There are only 5, and they serve really as a meta model for thinking about how you deliver value. Precisely specified value by product. That's not easy. And we're in a world of a lot of IT and cyber physical systems where you go, I don't know, is my braking system a product? Is my platform a product? How do you specify value precisely by product? All of a sudden, agile product management comes into bear. The role of product owner is really important. Identify the value stream for each product. Well, there's always one. You're shipping things now. It's not like nobody could ship anything until they added SAFe to the game. Okay, now I have to understand all the steps in the value stream. And that's where we start out now with the new version of implementing SAFe. In the first hour, you're figuring out your value stream. The new principle 6, we stole from this principle, make value flow without interruptions. And that's the ones that triggered, what does flow look like? What type of interruptions I am liable to counter? What type of impediments are going to occur? And what can I do about it? Let the customer pull. For us, that's not the manufacturing pull of have no inventory. We don't want much inventory, but we want to deliver to them in small bites, digestible bites, things that they can choose. And lastly, pursue perfection. Well, that's kind of a manufacturing model, thinking about, I want to get that last widget to be perfect. We don't really care about that. We do care about relentless improvement. So in our mind, we just made that proxy substitution. Once we did that, we decided that's the mindset we want. Agile, got that nailed. Lean thinking, we've got that nailed. And that displaced the house of lean. Well, when we displaced the house of lean, there were things on there we really cared about, like respect for people and relentless improvement. So we actually elevated those into the core values because respect for people is frankly more important than some of the other core values that we had. So that triggered the rework of the whole baseline to get you to thinking about value stream management, thinking about flow, thinking about the steps in flow. And then, of course, we needed teams to support that, the arts to support that, and the portfolio flow. So then we looked at the basic flow properties and decided there were 8, wrote that up and said, okay, but they're really different. The challenges that a team has with policies might be way different than the challenge that a portfolio has. So we assumed and posited that there were these 8 fundamental properties. They're really principles too, except that word is so overloaded. And then we applied them to all level. And each time it was like found money. It's, if solution trains don't flow, I'll bet it's because there are real issues with cross-coordination with the arts, because the arts are highly independent. They build subsystems. I'll bet they really hit the portfolio hard because it's such a big investment in solution train flow that policies associated with things like governance could really matter. So it was insightful for us. And then it started falling, the vision started falling in places. I think we get it now. I think we can really describe flow at all levels of the framework. We can describe the properties are the same. We can describe the properties and the solutions. The impediments are the same thing, but applied to different contexts. And then the whole thing folded in under that. And then naturally, Scrum and Kanban needed to change because they have to support flow. Another subtlety in flow that I think goes kind of underserved is if we look at traditional waterfall development, there were a lot of requirements, but requirements weren't really entities. They weren't stories. They didn't deliver value. It's like a thing a system might do. Agile brings physics to our work. We didn't have physics prior to Agile. There were no stories. There were no small modules of work that delivered value that could finish in a week. There was giant blobs of requirements. Well, now if you have physics of a thing going through a flow-based system, you can measure how that thing goes through the system. Without that, what do you measure in flow? Oh, I feel good about my day. How about you? No, did we really yield anything? So the combination of the Agile notion that we deliver small pieces of real value, not just an API or an infrastructure piece, but something the user can actually benefit from, and that we can measure that, made flow come together in a kind of, to me, a holistic way. It's like, I get it now. I can see that. We didn't have flow in waterfall. I don't know how you've flowed anything. A bunch of stuff was done, a bunch wasn't. Some was tested, some not. There was no real empirical way to establish how you were doing. I think Agile gives you that way, but it's not just the lean thinking. It's all based on widgets. But when that widget is a user story, all of a sudden it kind of all makes sense. And then you can stand back kind of in hindsight and perspective and say, I can see how flow needs to work now, and I can see how we can help the teams. And then one of the challenges we had is that, okay, flow is a thing that needs to be understood and coached. Who's going to do that? Well, none of the roles and responsibilities we had in the system addressed that. So that's what caused us to go back to the responsibilities, make those clear, create responsibility wheels, which is just a synthesis and a visual abstraction of the key responsibilities. So that, for me, that's what drove those changes. And then once we started that, it's like, well, we need every role to have, even business owners, Flow may not be their primary concern, but even a business owner has a set of responsibilities. So we'll create a responsibility wheel. For me, it was driven by the need to have higher performing teams, need to understand what real flow looked like, recognize that nothing we've given off the shelf to date, be it Scrum or Kanban as we applied it and say, was really ideal for flow. I don't think we're ideal now. I think we're more ideal. And I think that in future releases and future versions, we'll have the best of both worlds. We'll have measurable flow that doesn't interfere with the people doing the work. We'll have time boxes that allow for coordination of work and delivering larger baskets of value. Time boxes allow you to add up certain value you've already delivered in a release and announce it, which is what basically 6.0 is, right? A lot of this stuff we've already shipped. So for me, the underpinning was flow, the study was flow, the research was flow, and to get the teams flowing and then realize how that really cascades up the system was really cool. And I think that's the essence of this. What's different about this version of SAFe than prior versions is this sucker should go fast. People should really be able to deliver value a lot more quickly. And that's what we're all about.
Dean, through all of that great description that you just articulated, I think it uncovers something that a lot of folks in the market might not realize and I'll say probably don't appreciate. And that's how much really goes into, how much thought, how much consideration really goes into every tweak and change that's made in the framework. The market says what the market says. People have an emotional response to change. What I would hope that they could start to appreciate is all of the conversation, all of the back and forth, all of the pressure testing, all of the arguing for every little tweak that's made to every article in the framework. None of this is because Andy had a great idea in the shower and Rebecca just threw this thing in and Dean said this is what we're going to do, so that's what we're going to do. All of these ideas are presented, they're challenged, they're tested, they're refined in the market. And what we publish, what's put out there, is really what's left after every idea has been put through the grinder. And it's not that, every idea is perfect, but they're very well thought out, they're very well considered. A lot of enterprises, a lot of people on teams, a lot of people working in portfolios and in value streams and just throughout every level of abstraction, all of their thoughts and hard work and pains go into every single one of these changes.
I think we do pride ourselves on the intellectual rigor of that. Rebecca joined the team about a year ago. She finished her first, we call it an all-new article. And that means this is going to be really hard because we haven't ever invented this. I'm sure she'd be happy to share her experiences on putting forth her first version of the all-new business and technology article and how that evolved over time.
Yeah, I've come up with my own Rebecca term. They're called opinion hugs. So everybody gets together and gives a lot of opinions on what you're writing. And instead of seeing that as a negative, I prefer to see them as opinion hugs. But yeah, you come to the team and you've got this, I've got 20 years of experiences and inside of these organizations trying to achieve these. And some of the experiences I had was helping really people in business rather than inside of IT use agile practices. And I think, as I have discovered with other organizations, it's not always the case. Sometimes it's only inside of technology or only inside of IT. And when you can get all these business people together, beautiful things happen. So I want to write an article about all the beautiful things that happen. Well, first, got to give a demo, like anybody should, and say, this is all the patterns I've seen. Do you all see this as well? Yes, we've seen parts of this. Dean's been a participant before in an agile executive team, has of I, and we've seen that pattern. What does it look like if you take a bunch of nurses and you have them on an art and they're not actually delivering a piece of technology, they're delivering care? Has anybody seen anything like that? So you start with a demo, get a lot of feedback, a lot of threshing, and in a very positive way of really hey, I'm not sure on this. I can't see this, or I do see that. I haven't seen that before. Can you give me another example? And that starts to form the positivity around this is an idea that should become an article, right? A set of ideas. And then there's that continues. I'm going to write an outline and say, is there a way to explain Rebecca's experiences inside of an outline that other people can consume, that they can read? And I think that all results in a lot of, probably 25 revisions of that article. But they each got slowly better and better. I learned along the way. The team learned along the way. We're all able to explain as a team all of the methods that went in there, did a lot of learning. And it also comes out with us just being stronger of taking what people might consider like, I think you termed this once, Dean, a Rebecca-ism. How do you take a Rebecca-ism and make it consumable by everybody else so that they can go and make beautiful things happen around the world? It's honestly, it's addicting after a while to get those opinion hugs because everybody likes hugs, right? At first, it's intimidating, but it's worthwhile and needed, and you come out with an amazing result.
Well, and that's really kind of the first pass, right? Because then once that article is drafted, then it goes kind of outside of the team.
People have opinion hugs.
And there's a lot of opinion hugs from our fellow community and from other folks in the market that have, we'll call them opinion bear hugs, right? But so I think the point to this is, and why I wanted to bring it up is, these ideas just aren't things that we come up with. There's a lot of rigor that goes into it. And when it's released to the market, we understand that their initial reaction to some things when they change can be to resist, but they haven't had the opportunity to go through those opinion hugs and to think through it and have that thought process. They're reacting to the final product. So I think it's important to understand that, yes, we recognize change is hard. We recognize that when we release these new ideas, when terms change, it's not easy. But so much thought has gone into every decision that's been made, and we've decided that these changes are worthwhile, they're meaningful. We understand that change is hard, but we believe that the process of changing to embrace these new ideas and these new concepts are going to make us all better. And I think that's one of the things that SAFE has done so well over the years. When we were here all together in January and we lined up all of the frameworks from version 1 to version 6, and you look at just how things have changed based on what we've learned. And, what I also see when I look at those is how enterprise has embraced some of the concepts. And because they've embraced those concepts, well, then now it's time to accelerate those learnings into something bigger and something better. And I think, you look at 6.0 and you compare that to when we were first talking about releasing more frequently. And I remember when I was with one of my first clients and it was, hey, let's try and shift you to release, instead of once every 3 years, let's try and do it every year. And that was like this insane thing to them. But that same company today is releasing multiple times a day. So a lot of the maturity and a lot of the growth that we see is because the patterns of the past have taken us to kind of a new plateau, right? So we've achieved things and now there's new challenges to solve. So I think that's pretty cool. And you look at, again, at the concepts of flow and the concepts of high-performing teams that are in flow, and you remember 10 years ago, the concept of an agile team was just like foreign, right? That wasn't something that would ever work here. And now we're talking about an entirely different level of maturity, and it's a really cool thing.
And I think what we see in the framework team is it's a mix of push and pull. Some topics like the OKRs, Adam, that, we worked on, and about the demand for that in the market. Organizations were starting to use OKRs to create alignment, transparency. They were starting to ask us, Dean, when are you going to bring this into SAFE? When, in that instance, organizations were saying, can we have some guidance from you on how to bring OKRs into SAFE? And what did we do? We took our time, we researched, we identified 3 use cases. I think we've got a really good guidance article now around that topic. Others, though, perhaps the flow is a good example. Of course, organizations want to deliver flow and value faster, but they weren't talking about properties of flow or accelerators of flow. That was something that we realized through the research that we did was going to help organizations achieve their goals. So we were doing a little bit more of leading them to help them understand what they needed. But it's always a balance in terms of where do they want deeper guidance, where are they asking for it, and where do we think we can provide the guidance that maybe they don't need today, but once they see it, they're going to realize that is what they need to help them achieve their goals. In the articles, I was just thinking as Rebecca was talking, one thing I think we saw this time, particularly as we have more of a global audience, we start to see the articles be used as the foundation for a course or another assets. We spend a lot of time debating images this time. And actually, all the articles have a keystone image, followed by a series of 3 or 4 other images that really explain the concepts. That's a great place to start when you're trying to get alignment around a new concept. Do you have the right words and images to talk about this thing before you even start to build out the content? And we've spent many productive hours aligning around the images first that explain some of this new IP.
And some simple images might go through 20 or 30 reps.
Yeah.
Because we're communicating complex, deep thoughts in as simple a rendering as possible. Below the big picture, we don't have extremely detailed renderings. They're mostly things that explain complex things in a simple way. They're really hard, but we've also discovered that if we don't understand the outline and there isn't a keynote graph or a keystone graphic that we understand for the article, we probably don't know what we're talking about. So more and more we've come to all the way back up to what we call, we do these things called mob review, which is, I think it's fair to say that most every paragraph in every article has been reviewed by most every team member live. It's a labor-intensive process. But as we were reviewing articles, we'd go, well, this isn't the article we thought we had. And then we go, oh, we never really agreed on what the concept was. Well, we never really created an image that we thought that shows what we mean by decentralized decision-making or whatever. And then we go back up to the basics. What are we trying to communicate? What image would we use in class to do it? What are the features, the bullets associated with that image? And then once we have that structure, the articles are far, far easier. But when we get too far without doing that, then there's just too much rework. So it's basically coming back to first principles and say, have we shifted learning left enough? And our learnings, as experienced as we were over the course of SAFe 6.0, was we hadn't generally shifted learning left enough. And the rework we were doing was excessive, not because the article wasn't written or thorough, but it wasn't what we thought as a team we were agreeing to. So the shift learning left became one of our mantras in built-in quality. It's built right there because that, even with an experienced team that's written articles for years, if we didn't shift the concepts left, we were wasting time.
And I think that's a key element of flowing, right? If you don't understand the problem to be solved in the beginning, I mean, how many rework cycles did you see in a waterfall environment when you thought you understood a requirement, so you built a solution, and then you came back and it was completely wrong, right? So I think that's really cool to start with simplicity up front. What are we trying to solve? How do we articulate that in as clean of a way as possible? And I'll say this, in my experience over the years with the framework, I've always appreciated that for what they are. The framework articles are clear and concise. They're not overly long. They don't meander. They're to the point. They're clear. So I think to recognize the opportunities to get even better at that, I mean, it's going to make everyone better, especially when you start talking about explaining concepts across languages. It's hard enough to understand some of these things, let alone trying to do it through translation or as a second language. So I think starting with that keystone graphic, I mean, a lot of people learn in different ways, and a lot of people are visual learners. So that's a really great place to begin.
That's what triggered the big picture to begin with. I was writing and thinking about, Scaled Agile for years and just sketching things out. And I met with a large PMO group, a really large PMO group. My job was to tip them to Agile. It's like, good luck with that. Like, they basically sent me in there to see if I got chewed up or not. And I started thinking about that these folks were very capable. They knew more about the company than I would ever know. And I was going to teach them what they're doing wrong? No. What I decided to do was to show them a future state. And I said, what if we did have Agile teams everywhere? Well, there'd be lots of them. Well, a lot of them would need to work together. So we'd probably want them to work on a kind of common cadence so that we could inject work well and review that. And are those teams going to be able to work without some level of architectural governance and guidance? No, building a large system, you have to have some intentionality to architecture. So I just started sketching that out. I said the teams would work like this. The governance model would work like this. We'll have demos routinely so that the PMO can do their job to assess whether the customers are happy with the governance model. So I showed them the future state and just started sketching it out. And I was second or third rev by then. It wasn't like I just stood up at the whiteboard. They got it because they saw how they could behave differently. And that's what the big picture did. It said, that's different. Not we're Agilists and we know better than all you waterfall folks and it's going to be really cool. It's going to work like that. And then people could argue with it. They could say, well, I don't want it to work like that or whatever. That's fair, but at least you've engaged in a discussion about something you could point to. And then you could click on it. You could write the article and say, that's really it or that needs to be modified. So it gave a framework to express lots and lots of topics in small bites. These are basically, in the world, these are story-like things. They're just a couple thousand words. And they have to be self-consistent and consistent with the rest of the framework. But if you read one, you get a small story and a few links if you want to follow it, but you learn about that thing. We have an article on design thinking. I think doing that research, I have 5 books still on my desk on design thinking. We can't go to our large enterprise and say design thinking is important. Please read these 5 books and figure out what you mean by that. We have to take a position. We can say, of these tools in design thinking, there are many. We think empathy mapping is critical. Journey mapping is critical. Well, there are more tools than that. But we distill those things down to the things that we think are really important. And we always have a learn more, which is you want to know more about design thinking or lean UX. Here's where we learn this stuff. But our job is to make it digestible because there's incredibly complex problem to build systems that have been built before that take 100 or 1,000 people to do. We have to really distill and make approachable and readable the content. So design thinking is a field unto itself. Lean UX, you could, stack up the Kanban books. They would fill my office. Well, we've got basically 2 articles on Kanban, and that's enough to get the team going and to get scaled Kanban throughout the safe enterprise.
I don't think the value of that can be understated. I mean, as a former internal change agent, just being able to pick up an article and take it to an audience and have a discussion, that's really what I was always purchasing is I don't want to rethink everything. There's these fantastic people on the framework team that do all the take it all and put it into something that I can pick up, go take to whoever is the right audience where we need to have a debate and have a debate with common language. The framework gives that common language across the entire organization, which I think is just the biggest impact. And those articles, we talk about that too. Like, hey, who would use this article? Who are they going to take it to? What kind of conversation do we think they might have? And then we also go test that. So responsibility wheels, I think, were huge, as well as the pieces of flow of being able to actually go test in a customer. If you have this responsibility wheel now for a solution manager, what kind of discussions are you going to have now? And hearing back, this is awesome. Now I can have a concrete conversation with somebody who wasn't really understanding the role, go elevate them, go escalate them to be able to do the best possible job that they can, versus a value stream management article to be able to bring people together to understand that value stream management is a team-based sport, really requires a lot of people. So what kind of debates will people have about them? How can we create discussion is also a big part of our mindset.
That's great, guys. So we've done a lot, right? You all have done a lot. And there's a lot on the horizon. So when I look at kind of what's next, we've got a summit in Prague, we've got a summit in Nashville, and we're going to continue to tell the Safe 6.0 story. We have a lot of work to do to continue to build assets and to build tools that people can use to then implement a lot of the things that we've talked about. And that's going to be a lot of work. But then we also need to start thinking about, well, what's next on the horizon? What do y'all think? I mean, what steps will we take to start figuring that out? What ideas are you kicking around now? Because obviously you haven't just been focused on this all alone for the last 3 years. Maybe there's been other shower ideas that are amazing that you can't wait to explore. I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, the summit is a great way to kind of predict some of the areas that we're exploring, both in terms of the speakers from our partner network, but also what we as a framework team are talking about. I was just thinking, what did we do on March 15th, Dean and Rebecca, after the launch had gone out? I think we give ourselves a couple of hours to breathe, pat ourselves on the back.
And somebody put on a jiffy that said, I'm bored.
And then we got started again. So what are some of the themes we're seeing at the summit, and what are some of the themes that we're seeing emerging more generally? What Safe 6.0 did is create a lot of surface for us to go deeper in certain areas. Rebecca mentioned the business and technology patterns, this ability we now have to talk about what it means to take SAFe beyond IT. We're going to see much more in that space. We have talks on Agile executive teams, business-enabled arts, already on the program at the SAFe Summit in Prague. Other areas like AI. How is AI going to impact the work we do in terms of the work we do in the teams, but also the work we need to do as business owners to define and prioritize opportunities to harness these technologies? We're seeing talks again on AI at the SAFe Summit, and we'll see much more on that in the future. There's other areas that we're starting to explore as well. We saw, and we've heard many times, that organizations are managing huge portfolios of products. Thousands and thousands of people coming together to build not only complex systems, but manage priorities across this huge product portfolio. In many regards, they're taking things like LPM and portfolio management to an even higher level. We've talked in the past, Dean, about enterprise epics, what it means to manage portfolio of portfolios. That's another area where we're getting questions on a regular basis. How do we apply LPM to some of the highest concerns of the enterprise? And again, you'll see talks. We have a talk, I think, Rebecca, on that at the upcoming SAFe Summit as well.
Andy, that's interesting. I just finished listening to a book about Jack Welch on the flight here, and I've been thinking a lot about it. It was a long one. It was, I want to say 24 hours. It was a really long book. And I've really started thinking about GE in its heyday. How would we apply SAFe in that space so that a guy like Jack Welch could have understood what was going on across that massively complex portfolio of businesses? Because if you look at any one of them, if you look at the train business that was based in my hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania, building a train's hard. Building a train engine is hard. building the electronics that go in a train that run the engine are hard. And that is an insignificant problem that somebody at that level would never hear about. So it'll be really interesting to see how the IP evolves when we start looking at these large and complex organizations. I mean, we obviously have worked with Boeing, but really tackling that portfolio of problems, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and maybe, I'll let Rebecca and Dean say something that often emerges at the same type of organizations. As you said, Adam, they have this one concern: how do we manage our investments across huge opportunities and multiple portfolios? But also, how do we actually take the steps needed to apply Lean and Agile to building these complex systems? And I think Dean and Rebecca, furthering the guidance around what we call enterprise solution delivery, is another area we're going to see more work in.
Yeah, we just left that discussion. Is large-scale value stream identification, advances in enterprise solution delivery, and portfolio of portfolios 9 topics or 1? And we're just in the process of basically kicking off an initiative to get more serious about that next level of guidance for the largest customers. We design for scale. Large enterprises adopted us. Some of the largest IT shops and companies in the world have adopted SAFe, and they're putting more and more demands, they're not really putting demands on, I want to get the Agile teams better. I want to do that. That's our job. They're putting demands on, how do we think about that? What is a portfolio? What makes a good portfolio? What are the bounds of it? How do I fund that? How do I know what's in there? Do I have value streams that cross portfolios? All good questions, and all places that we need some additional semantics, need some definitions. I mean, one of the things we do is we define things in our terms, and then we put meat behind that definition. So the portfolio has a definition. We're going to build on that. Portfolios, that doesn't really exist except as a concept. So larger and larger systems using the same basic Agile practice. We don't really need to rethink teams and arts and solution trains. Those really work. But how you combine them to build truly the largest systems in the world. And there's a notion in the world out there that, and you could hear that from unsophisticated people. Your value streams need to be independent. Well, that's awesome. And if your value streams are independent, that means that no user can actually leverage a thing in one value stream and another thing in a value stream as a differentiator. I just left the DevOps Enterprise Forum. One of the companies told a story, a telecom company, about how hard it is to do a small thing that touches the cross value streams because their architecture is not designed for that. So to understand how to exploit the opportunities that exist by mining those dependencies, minimizing the ones you don't have to have. But if I need an API to support a use case for another value stream to create a differentiated value proposition that nobody can compete with, I'm going to figure out how to do it. So those are the types of issues that people are dealing with. And the notion that we can be, we're an island, we're a value stream. I deliver an entertainment system. Well, to more than one customer. Does anybody actually want to use my entertainment system to display a nav? Because maybe I have a nice little display there. So those cost-cutting issues are challenging, tough, take longer and cost more, but they deliver extra value. So enterprises are waking up to the fact that, wow, that's a cool value stream. Making money, Horizon 1 products, Horizon 2, and these other value streams could use what they know. This gets really precious when you talk about things like AI. And you look at most of the use cases for AI that you want to apply, let's just say in understanding your customer better, it's probably going to cost value streams because you're going to have different pockets of information coming from various value streams. And then you're going to end up with kind of a centralization problem, which is in order to really mine from an AI what my users are doing, I need all this data from different value streams to be normalized. So you end up with a centralization-decentralization problem again, which is if I don't know what somebody's doing at the pharmacy, I don't know when if they leave a hospital that's affiliated with my insurance company, they're using it as a pharmacy or not, well, I've got to collect that data. So these are all complex issues. We always relish the fact that the problem seems to always be ahead of us, not behind us. We've not solved the problem of helping the people who build the world's most important systems do so faster and better and at lower costs and have more fun. So we're always excited about what happens next. I didn't get bored for a couple of days. I'm not even sure that I was bored this weekend. Monday could be different. Only the team will be able to tell.
Dean, I think that's a great place to wrap it. And how I wanted to wrap this is I just want to recognize the amazing people that you all are, because I feel like people lose sight of the people that build the solution. In the market, we are so many things to so many people, and we impact so many people that I feel like on occasion, people realize that there's people behind the solution. And Rebecca, you're an amazing artist, and that's probably not something people know. Dean, you're one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life, which is amazing because you're also the scariest person I'd ever met for a long time too. But that was my problem, not yours.
I'm going to cry and laugh here.
And Andy, you're probably the most selfless giving person that there is. I swear, man, you don't sleep. I can be on Slack at any point in the night and you're up and you're responsive. But I also know that, you take great care of your family and everything. And I just want people to know that this organization, the people that are here, really care about people, that we authentically believe that we're doing all that we can to make the world a better place to work in, a better place to live in, and to deliver some pretty cool products while having some fun. I mean, that's what this is all about. Dean, you were largely retired when all this started, and you're here because you're passionate about it.
I was terrible at retirement.
Well,
it's the only time in my life I've been unhappy is when I tried to retire.
Well, and now you're back here doing things that you find to be really enjoyable. And I think that's what folks really need to remember is that everyone is here because we believe that we're helping other people and we enjoy what we do. It's been great just hanging out and talking. It's not something that is easy for us to do, even when we all live and work in the same place. So thank you all so much, and we'll see
Thank you,
out
Adam,
there.
for putting this great program together.
Thank you.
You guys
Thanks,
are
Adam.
too kind. Thank you all.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks for listening to our show today. Be sure to check out the show notes and revisit past episodes at scaledagile.com/podcast. Relentless improvement is in our DNA, and we welcome your suggestions for the show. If you have something to share, send us an email at podcast@scaledagile.com.